Every time I play a gacha game, I drop it after a month or maybe even less than 2 weeks. Why? Persistent problems that make it boring. Gacha games are riddled with repetitive mechanics, uninspired gameplay, and lack of any real RPG elements as their games are advertised as such. In short, they lack depth, variety, creativity, and freedom. Qualities that are very important to RPG games. They've also contributed to broader gaming problems like live service models and microtransactions. While gacha games aren't solely responsible, their success amplifies these trends. Not only that, their communities are some of the worst communities to ever lived, breathed, and walk this earth. They are truly insane people. You want to see what Arkham Asylum might look like in real life? Look at the Western Genshin Impact community. It's nearly a one-to-one recreation. We'll be talking about what is wrong with gacha games and why I don't find them fun and entertaining anymore. Starting with the gameplay itself, then the community. Also, let me know down in the comments below on what you think are the problems with gacha games. Maybe also if, my criticisms are valid. For me, gacha games lack any depth and variety to its mechanics that will keep me engaged and entertained. I'm most particularly talking about the games that are similar to Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact was groundbreaking for gacha games, offering a large open world inspired by Breath of the Wild. Genshin Impact has gameplay mechanics that are similar, especially when it comes to its adventure and exploration. You can run, walk, swim, and glide through an open world. Wow, it's like they're somehow 10 years behind the gaming industry. If we compare it to the games before like Fate Grand Order, Honkai Impact 3rd, Azur Lane, Arc Knights, they didn't really have much gameplay in their games. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Honkai Impact was kind of groundbreaking, I suppose, because it's one of the few action RPG gacha games that were released in that period of time. But Genshin Impact really changed everything. Now, I do find most of the other types of genres to be really boring as well, but it's mostly just my preferences of games. I'm not really into heavy strategy games, which are a lot of gacha games in that aspect. I played Fate Grand Order for maybe 2 to 3 years. My YouTube channel was originally an FGO channel, but I got bored after those years playing it and I suddenly find more action-packed gameplay to be more fun. FGO simply didn't have that. I do still have my share of turn-based combat games that I find to be fun, like Persona and Pokemon, but those games are miles better than any of the strategy JRPG types of gacha games. I do have the most criticisms for the games that are similar to Genshin Impact like Wuthering Waves and Tower of Fantasy. My experience with action adventure RPG gacha games were very short-lived. I did not find much enjoyment in indulging those games. As much as I wanted to really like the game, I just couldn't. These games were really just selling a dream in my opinion. Like the concept of an anime game with an open world combined with RPG mechanics is like a dream game for a lot of people, especially when it showed signs to be similar to a game like Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild had really cool gameplay mechanics that allowed us to approach any fight with a lot of variety. It also had one of the best adventuring and exploring experiences that you can get in this day and age. The fact that you can climb most walls, hills, mountains, and you can glide everywhere in the air. The freedom of just exploring the world of Breath of the Wild was so nice and liberating. You'll find cool things about the area that you explored and maybe encounter really cool items and weapons along the way. Combined with the creativity in your head of using anything at your disposal to defeat enemies and solve puzzles. That game really showed what it's like to be a true open world experience. Genshin Impact, Wuthering Waves, and games alike, their open world was really dull. It wasn't bad by any means, but it just really lacked the essence of what Zelda had. Everything in Zelda felt really dynamic and it had a lot of depth. In Zelda, you can experiment with physics, create tools, and interact dynamically with the environment. Like you can create a weapon out of nowhere in Tears of the Kingdom, and there are so many ways to mess with the monsters in the game. Gacha games, by contrast, constrain exploration with level caps, stamina systems, and repetitive resource grinding. Oh, I can't do this mission because I'm too low leveled. Oh, I can't do that because I don't have enough stamina points. There's an enemy camp there, better defeat it to get useless resources that I won't ever use in the next hour. Yeah, sure, some areas in the world of Genshin are cold, hot, raining with thunderstorms, the landscape looks beautiful, but Zelda has more than that. Gacha games' open world feels so constricting and unrewarding because they are gacha games. They need to constrict you so you spend money and have more privileges. That's their way of rewarding you. Gameplay mechanics, customization, there are barely any real RPG elements in an action-adventure RPG gacha game. What does Honkai Star Rail and FGO have over something like Persona 3 in terms of gameplay mechanics? Nothing. Honkai Star Rail and FGO are the bare bones of what a turn-based JRPG entails. They do not have the depth and creativity to even mimic the status of what Persona is. And most gacha games are not able to compete with any other games in their respective genres. It's not bad by any means, but it gets very repetitive too quickly and lacks any real individuality in its approach to the game. Take Wuthering Waves for example. In terms of its combat mechanics, it's similar to Genshin Impact. In fact, it is miles better and much more polished. We can change characters mid-fight to get special effects, use ults, special skills, normal attacks and heavy attacks, parrying attacks, dodging. It seems like it has depth to it, and there are quite a lot of things you can do to approach the fights in unique ways, which looks great for an action RPG, right? To a certain extent, we can give credit to the games because they excel in character design and accessibility, offering free-to-play players a chance to enjoy beautiful and polished visuals. However, these strengths are overshadowed by their shallow mechanics. The only RPG element that these games have is forming a party, being able to change into different characters, upgrading levels, skills, and weapons, but that's about it. All characters in the game are already set to their predefined rules and weapons. That part makes sense, but what doesn't make sense is that it also applies to your own main character. Why do our own character need to be predefined to its role and weapon? We can't change the class of our own character, we can't change the type of the weapon that we use, we can't change or swap the skills that we use, but we can change the gender of our character though. Why? Because of the story? I mean, if we use the excuse of because of the story, isn't that just a lazy excuse to not implement more things in the game? The only thing that Tower of Fantasy did right was that it had character customization. You can create your own character and that was amazing. But the game overall wasn't that good. Genshin and Wuwa, they do not have any customization or whatsoever, which to be honest is what put me off the most. I feel like this is common with most JRPGs. You cannot change your class, you cannot change your type of weapon, and you cannot change the type of skill sets that you can use. Most of these gacha games are not RPGs, they're just JRPGs. So I don't know why a lot of sites and game stores label these games as RPGs when it's clearly not. I'm not really a big fan of JRPGs. There are a few exceptions though, like Persona for example, but JRPGs have different direction and culture with your standard Western RPGs. JRPGs prioritize story and predefined characters, which contrasts with the player-driven customization found in RPGs. Everything you do is just battling and doing quests, then you level up, then you grind some more and advance the main story, and it just repeats. There are no variety of skills that you can change, there is no customization for your own character, barely any depth, variety, and freedom in most if not all the mechanics. There are just not many ways you can approach the game differently from others. In gacha games, the only difference between you and the other player is how much money you spend, and it sucks. While yes, a lot of players are fine with predefined characters and such because it suits better for storytelling, but I feel like it just highlights how the lack of freedom limits replayability and experimentation as well as their creativity towards the story. They got the concept down to a T, but their execution is just not impressive. Also, I have to say that the character interactions in action-adventure RPG gacha games are not as good as Zenless Zone Zero, Fate Grand Order, Blue Archive, Girls Frontline 2 Exilium, and the like. They are way better, even if they all still lack RPG elements. At least, those games got it right, and much better than Genshin Impact. Now we move on to the nitty-gritty part of gacha games, and that is the community. Oh my god, the communities can be pretty horrid. While some gacha game communities can be pretty chill, welcoming, and cool, some others can also be a total toxic waste. It can be more toxic than Elephant's Foot in Chernobyl. That's how bad some of the community is. Great example is the Western Hoyoverse communities. You've seen the news, you've seen Twitter, you've seen what these people do. Hoyoverse communities are rabid, mentally ill, and violent. Well, it makes sense that you see more of those types of people in a community because of its popularity and depending on the social media that you use, but I have only seen the most terrible and egregious things happen from the Western Hoyoverse communities. I've never seen FGO or Blue Archive players do the things that Hoyoverse players do. I don't know, maybe I haven't seen it yet, but those Western Genshin fans on Twitter are... man, they're literally something else. For some reason, they will cry and whine about literally everything. Whether it's about the game, the lore of the game, the designs of the characters, they seem to dislike everything. The worst part is, they project their headcanons onto the game itself and the community. They'll shove it down your throat, and when you don't accept their headcanons, they'll call you all sorts of things and then they harass you. It's similar to the My Hero and Persona community in a way, although Persona community knows which ones are the bad and which ones are the good. But yes, these Western Hoyoverse fans are some of the worst that you'll ever see. They're so hung up on their race, the sexual orientation, and the relationship of these characters. I mean, like, who the hell cares? Who the hell cares if they're light skin, dark skin, gay, or whatever? Why does it matter so much? Do you seek representation in every media that you consume? These are just fictional characters. They're not here to hold you in their arms and protect you from the world. I don't understand why a lot of artists that draw the characters with a lighter shade of skin suddenly gets called out and then harassed. I don't know why when our own headcanons of ships are straight, a lot of you will call us homophobic, dangerous, and violent. It doesn't make sense when we all have our own preferences for things to suddenly get shunned and harassed for merely having different opinions. What I hate the most about this is that these people who harass artists, players that like straight ships and just have different opinions than them, they will try to justify their opinion like it's the objectively right opinion to have. The thing about some artists who were quote-unquote wrong about coloring the skin of the character when making fan art, these people suddenly started comparing the history and race of people in real life to these fictional characters. What about these fictional characters in a fictional setting in a fictional game have anything to do with historical accuracy? In what world, in a point of time, there were monsters called the Hilichurls or Mondstadt or Liyue or whatever? If you say these things are inspired by real history, well, yes, they are inspired, but they are not real history. I know that Fate takes actual historical people and places into their games, but it's still fictional material that was inspired by real history. There were no such things called a Holy Grail War that had masters and servants and magic. It's not real. It doesn't make sense to equate fictional material with real history, even if they were just inspired by it. Also, speaking of not equating fictional material with real life, these people do not have the capabilities to separate fiction from reality, and it shows. Why do they treat these characters like people in real life? Not only in gacha games, but with nearly every fictional media that exists. It's actually quite a serious problem because it's getting more prevalent nowadays and it's causing a lot of harassment. The characters that were created to have an intended meaning from its actual creator now are getting twisted with people's distorted realities. Like I explained before in the Naoto and Kanji video, people fail to see what these actual characters represent and stand for, and they instead project their own delusions onto these characters. Then they get mad when the creators of said characters and other people don't uphold or feed into their delusions. These communities are also very parasocial with the characters, which again feeds into this whole idea of not being able to separate fiction with reality. It's fine that you have an attachment to characters and you see yourself in those characters, but it's important to actually know the characters beforehand. A lot of people nowadays see characters relating to them instead of them relating to the characters, and it's a really big difference between the two. They don't see these characters for who they are, they see these characters for what their own selves perceive them to be. In the end, I was just shitting on Hoyoverse games and Genshin Impact the whole time. No, but in all seriousness, gacha games nowadays are starting to look like one another. They only have maybe 3 to 4 differences between them, excluding the story and characters. Comparing them with actual games from the RPG genre may be unfair, but a lot of them are derived from them. So I think it's fair to use games like Zelda Breath of the Wild as a comparison. To be honest, despite me finding a lot of them boring, I'm still looking forward to what they can produce. Like Ananta, for example. It looks like GTA but anime, and it looks good. Hopefully it can at least address the problems that I have with current action adventure gacha games. It looks promising, but I'm going to keep my expectations grounded. That's about it. See ya.